rather complex, but I will explain why we have chosen such a complex headline for this webinar. So it's addressing methane emissions in the context of energy system integration. What climate value for gas? But I believe whatever event we have nowadays, it's very important to repeat one's message that methane is a very potent greenhouse gas. And 25% of current global warming is caused by methane. I think most of you have heard it and know, but I believe this is a message that needs to reach everybody. And any decrease of anthropogenic methane emissions is good in fighting climate change, in agriculture, in waste management, and also in energy sector. EU is very engaged in this process, and current policies would bring methane emissions down compared to 2005 levels by 29%. Depending on the 2030 targets, it could be 35 to 37%. And definitely methane strategy's adoption by the European Commission is a bold step forward, but we should build on this step. Strategy is only strategy. It should be implemented and, if needed, could be sharpened. And today we are turning towards fossil fuel side. Fossil fuels globally are responsible, a bit depending on estimations, but up to 30% of anthropogenic methane emissions. And there is, I would say, already global consensus that coal should be phased out. Even in most parts where a lot of coal is being used, I think it's a feeling that you do this. There is also clear understanding, at least in some parts of the world, that oil should go down. But gas is standing very much different compared to coal and even oil. And it's not because that somebody loves or dislikes it. It's because that the modeling that is being done, and some goes for carbon neutral world in 2050, still sees very much use of natural gas. The reason is rather simple, because by higher carbon price, a lot of gas CO2 could be stored or used, and it could still seen as a cost-efficient option compared with other technologies. So it is seen that in molecular use, gas has a privileged role. So if we see this tendency, and then we have shorter-term tendencies that phasing out coal in many regions would require more natural gas, and take into account that circular economy would require use of biomethane and biogas. So that's bring us that all these arguments make methane emissions in gas value chain a crucial and urgent issue. Because as of time pressure for action to curb the climate change is rather limited, we can't afford loss of credibility and changes in the directions. So if you look on this complex issue, there are different aspects. And I have today excellent speakers with me. Stefano Grassi, Head of Cabinet of the Energy Commissioner Kadri Simpson, Jutta Paulus, member of European Parliament from Greens European Free Alliance. She is Green from Germany. Nicolas Gonzalez Casares, member of European Parliament, group of the Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats in the European Parliament. He is Spanish socialist. Mark Ratka, UN Environmental Program. He is head of Energy and Climate Division. Francisco de la Flor, with two hats, Enagas, director of Enagas, and GIE, Gas Infrastructure Europe board member. And I could also add that he is one of the driver, or the biggest initiator on the European industry side to deal with the issue, to be more proactive and strong in this direction. And Antoine Rostand, president of Kairos. It is an energy research company that looks very specifically also on methane emissions. And last but not least is my co-host. It is Poppy Kalesi, European Environmental Defense Fund, She leads energy program of EDF in Europe. Poppy, the floor is now to you.
Thank you very much, Andres, and thank you very much, first and foremost, to the Florence School of Regulation for working with us to bring really, looking at the participants today, really Europe's top thinkers on the issue. As you mentioned, Andres, we have excellent speakers today to focus on the impulses of the EU's methane strategy. So as you all know, a little over a week ago, the European Commission published the much awaited EU methane strategy, which is setting a very clear direction of travel in terms of, what the gas industry has to do to remain relevant for at least the next 10 years. There are many concrete ideas, many directions in this methane strategy, and I think the onus is now on all of us, stakeholders, and I see we have Europe's most prominent energy and climate policymakers with us today. We have some of Europe's leading technology developers, industry leaders, UNEP, and if we look at the participants list, we have really some of the most important engineers, economists, academics, and doers. And I think, as we saw only 3 days ago, the European Commission's legislative plan for 2021 was called by many of my colleagues as a tsunami of legislative initiatives. This is the most important, I would say this is the most important piece of work for a whole generation. Europe is setting on a path to completely reform our economy, to completely reform the way of living. And policymakers, the European Commission, and all of us stakeholders, we have a unique responsibility to really bring all our constructive, practical ideas about how to make the Green Deal a reality. And methane emissions, as you said, Andres, is one of those issues that could really help us make very quick wins and help us achieve our goals a little bit faster. The challenge will remain hard, but I think in this call and in general, Europe has the ingenuity and the way and the possibility to solve this issue well and in collaboration with global partners and effectively. So I'm very much looking forward to hear today from Mr. Grassi a little bit his ambitions and hopes on how can the stakeholders and policymakers help you to really deliver on this ambition. Jutta Paulus and Nicolas Casares, they've already been leading in the European Parliament, and they've already been having conversations in the Industry Committee, who is the likely committee that's going to be discussing such issues, not only on methane, but broadly, the role of gas. We're talking about system integration and hydrogen, but next year, the other big important piece of legislation is, of course, the gas market reform, which is due in the last quarter of 2021. And I'm very, very curious to understand, how can Europe can set up for success in decarbonizing the gas markets. I believe methane is core to these efforts and a key enabler. And of course, later on, we will hear from Mark Kratka from UNEP, who is building the infrastructure for all of us to be able to understand what's going on globally. Antoine Rostand is going to update us on latest technology that's going to enable users to act. And Francisco de la Flor will tell us about the really hard work of getting, creating change in an industry that is used to having kind of a certain way of operating, but has risen up to the challenge, and they're working constructively to find a solution. So very, very much looking forward to the conversation today, and I believe the Q&A session is going to be a treat with all those thinkers we have in the participants today.
Thank you, Poppy. And you already have mentioned our first speaker. It's Stefano Grassi, Head of Cabinet of Energy Commissioner Kadri Simpson. And again, congratulations with a successful adoption of the strategy. Stefano, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Let me first check if you can hear me.
We do it very well, so perfect.
Thank you very much, Professor Pilbucks. Let me start, please, by saying that almost 20 years ago, when I was a younger official, you were one of the person I was looking up to when I was in the Secretariat General, and we saw your contribution to setting up a real, genuine single energy market. And I think you're continuing to help advance the energy union and the Green Deal with your work at the Florence School of Regulation, and we must really appreciate what the school is doing. We would like to have an even stronger and more structured cooperation with the Florence School of Regulation, between our services and our cabinet and the school. We are advancing there, and we do hope that very soon we will have this form of structured cooperation, because we truly appreciate relying on your advice, your expertise, and your studies. And I think the fact that you chose to focus on the topic of methane some months ago and produce briefs, and today you're organizing this meeting, is also a testimony of how much fitting is your research agenda with the policy priorities of the European Union and the Commission. Just one word also to greet the members of Parliament, Madam Paulus, Mr. González Cáceres, and other allies that we have in this methane venture, like Mr. Radka, and also in one way also Poppy Calesi. We met in other seminars, and I think stimulus is always important for us to be more ambitious. I will now give you today a run through, or I will not walk you through our strategy, because you all know it, you have read it. The Commission, I think, was very clear in the document what was our ambition. But I wanted to share with you 3 points mainly. The first is that we all of us are working on many important pieces of work, and especially in the Commission, we always try to give our best for all our strategies and documents we put on the table. But on this one, on methane, I think we really had the feeling that we were doing the right thing for once. First, because I think even if we rightly are focusing on addressing and reducing carbon dioxide, I think we cannot tolerate any blind spot in our policy to address greenhouse emissions. And sometimes you have impression, for instance, the issue of air quality is a bit not disappearing, but taking a less prominence whenever we only focus on the climate benefits of the actions we are doing. And also methane was a bit part of this, being a son of a lesser god compared of CO2 emissions. So we really thought that if you see, and all of you know it very well, how harmful, how damaging are the methane emissions, it is really not understandable why actions is not taken boldly and effectively there. Especially because, again, is the paradoxical element that there is so much can be done in a very cost-effective way, and as you mentioned, Professor Pilbucks, in a relatively rapid benefits, at least in the energy sector. Second, I will say that we always felt that what we were doing was not a backward-looking exercise. Because yes, there is a part of cleaning up, there is a part of addressing a problem that is linked also to fossil fuels generation and transport, but like coal, which are going to have a declining part in our energy mix in the coming years. But we see also a very strong forward-looking element in what we are doing, because all our scenarios and the scenarios that we see from industry, they show that gas will continue to have a share of our energy mix up to 2050, even if hopefully will be progressively replaced by decarbonized gases and hydrogen. So there is an element of medium to long term that we need to address there. Our agriculture will not disappear from one day to another, luckily, and will remain a very important component of our economy and our social life. So again, I think it is very important to look at the issue of methane in a forward-looking perspective. And what was important for us in writing the strategy, and I hope we achieved that result, was to have an integrated strategy. So to bring together not only energy, but also agriculture and environment, to have something where we both could combine global and domestic voluntary actions from the industry and the different actors, and also concrete legislative intervention to consolidate the framework and have something that bites. And third, something that we're both addressing at the same time, the domestic EU dimension and the international dimension. This is an area where EU has an uncontested technological leadership, for instance, in satellite monitoring and the Copernicus system, and this will get better and better also, and getting a more precise picture of where methane emissions are, but also because it's sufficient to look at any map of the world and see where the big emitters are, etc. And you understand that we need to be credible to leverage our also economic and energy importer weight to promote I will say courageous action also on the side of our partners. Final second point that I wanted to make is that we were relatively encouraged by the reactions where we saw to our strategy. I think the industry was positive. The members of parliament will tell themselves their appreciation or assessment of the strategy. We saw a lot of positive vibes. I'm very encouraged by the fact that Spain has indicated that they would like to be a partner in setting up the observatory with us. They are ready to co-fund part of it. They even offered the possibility to host the observatory in Spain. That we have to see. But I think that together with UNEP, we are very motivated, and I think this observatory will become a reality. Very encouraged also by the reaction from industry. On the 21st of November, we will have this oil and gas methane partnership 2.0 meeting, and we will set up, let's say, step up a gear what the OGMP has already done. I think already half of the global players will be part of it, and we hope to extend it in numbers and scope also in the future. So I think for once we were, let's say, relieved to see this good uptake and feedback on our strategy, and we hope this will help create a momentum. Final point from me, and we'll close here. It has to be very clear, and you also, Madam Calesi, picked it up. This strategy is a beginning. It's not the end point. Sometimes you are happy in the Commission on the Wednesday afternoon when we have done a document and it's out. This is just the beginning of the work. And on some aspects like MRVs, we are quite advanced. I think we have a lot of already of material and elements to work on, but there are other areas where I would like to encourage all the participants. I saw there is an incredible number of players and actors that are connected today, and then also is an offer to all the other major actors who are part of this panel to help us. I think an area where we need to get it right when we go to legislation is, and then further actions, is the LDRs, where I think there is a lot of good practices among the industry on leak detection and repair. And it will be important that we can rely also on some comparative analysis, some studies or some elements that help us to build on these good practices, and then build on that and try to get something right there. Final point for me, the most delicate point in moving forward will be the work on methane emission import standards on incentives to apply across the supply chain, and also especially on fossil fuels imported in the EU or consumed in the EU. And that, I think, it's a very delicate issue. How do you design it? Provided, of course, we all agree it's a good thing. How do we design it? How do we apply? What will be the best verification and enforcement mechanism? And is there any geopolitical impact or impact on energy security that we need to take into account? It's a difficult area. Someone already mentioned that we have an intense work program in the coming months for 2021. And I think to get things right requires a lot of study, a lot of analysis, and a lot of consultation in this area. I think there is not one service or administration that can know it all. So mine is an open call for help, for assistance, for feedback, for advice to all of you who wants to be part, and especially to Professor Pierbalgs and the Florence School of Regulation. I think your help on these and other issues will be great. So I stop here. I leave for the other participants, and I will be very attentively listening because we value your opinions, and I hopefully we will together take forward the work that we started with the strategy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefano, and thank you for kind words, and again, congratulations. You mentioned one issue that was most difficult in adoption of the strategy, when you have met the stakeholders and also your colleagues in the European Commission, which have been the most difficult issues to convince to move forward? What felt you as a main difficulty in really adopting strategy and steps that you are proposing, or there was basically consensus?
I have to say it was a relatively easy initiative to work on, because there is a lot of consensus on the things to do and also the best way forward. I will say two areas where we discussed internally, but I think we rapidly found an agreement, was should we go for an energy-only strategy or for an integrated strategy? The reason being that I think you can interpret in different way what is in the governance regulation and what the Parliament asked us. Should we have a strategy only for energy and do it fast? Because indeed we took a bit of months to prepare it. Or it's better to expand the scope. If you look at statistics on where the emissions are coming from, then if you want to have credible action, it's better to have an integrated strategy, but then it takes more time, it takes more negotiation. Are you having a similar level of ambition for all areas, etc., etc., etc. The other area was, well, how much do we build on voluntary, so soft law, self-regulation from the sector, and how much do we need regulation, and is going to be sequential. Now, in a way, I think we believe that we need to intervene through regulation, so it will be done relatively fast next year compared to the strategy. So I cannot really say that we first have a moment of self-regulation and then we go to regulation. But I think we really want to capitalize and build on the goodwill and the good practices from industry. So in any case, legislation takes time to be approved, it takes time to be implemented. So I think we are in parallel encouraging and trying to motivate the industry to do more voluntarily, because this will help. So to some extent, these were in our internal debate the most complicated part. But I have to say there are other initiatives where I think it's more difficult to negotiate internally and outside the final Commission position.
Thank you very much. European Parliament was mentioned a couple of times by Stefano in very positive light, and I could say from my experiences that whatever you propose, if you have no good support of European Parliament, you are doomed. because member states will be always divided. So there will be always different. So European Parliament is really one body that could really even make a Commission proposal more ambitious, or even convince that the whole legislative or even not legislative initiative has enough power. And I'm happy to give the floor to Jutta Paulus, member of European Parliament. Jutta, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for organizing and thank you for having me. And I'm very glad that this issue has come to, let's say, a bit more public attention than was the case before. I'm still a bit worried that Commission is still using the 100-year timeframe numbers for assessing the climate impact of methane, because everyone on the panel surely knows that that methane is much more short-lived than CO2. Thus, using the 100-year time frame, you sort of dilute the climate impact of methane, which is converted to CO2 with a half-life of about 12 years. And I have seen the respecting regulation. It was in one of those many NV newsletters which we always receive, where the greenhouse gas potential data for the greenhouse gases is set down, and Commission shall use the 100-year values from IPCC assessment report number 5, while number 6 is being prepared right now from 2021 on. So basically, we will be working with outdated data when assessing the climate impact of greenhouse gases, which I think is problematic, but that's not the main issue today. I really like the comprehensiveness of the strategy, going not only on the energy sector, but also on waste and agriculture. What I did miss, I must say, is the clear outline and the clear pathway. There is, the only thing that's really mentioned is that Commission is going to tackle methane leaks and let's call it evitable methane emissions from coal mines, or something with legislative proposals. But what I would really have liked to see is that we not only implement an MRV, but we actually set out the pathway to come. Say, okay, we will collect data for, let's say, 2 years, and after that we will set up a certification scheme so that industry can prepare for that and can maybe say, okay, it's good that we are counting our emissions all in the same fashion and report them in the same fashion, but at the same time we should prepare for being one of the, let's call it, grade A suppliers, instead of just only focusing on measuring. I had a bit of a déjà vu because I'm the rapporteur on the CO2 emissions from maritime transport, where we have an MRV system in place since 2018, and still we have these discussions. Well, what are we going to do with the data? Well, of course we have to use the data in order to curb emissions, because just counting emissions does not help in tackling the climate crisis. So I really would have liked to see something more concrete on certification schemes and how this is going to take place, and not just, well, we'll have a look into it. I think that it would be a very good idea to have a clear deadline there. We will start certification, let's say, in 2024 or something. Secondly, I was a bit disappointed when it comes to the agricultural sector. What we are reading there is more or less, okay, we'll breed new animals which have maybe less methane emissions. Of course, this is affecting ruminants only. But if I imagine that how many animals we are rearing in the EU, and if you would want to replace every single cow in dairy production, in meat production, with a, I'd say a bit, this is a bit provocatively, a miracle breed, how many decades is this going to take? And also when it comes to feed additives, we have some good research going on there, but feed additives will not decrease methane emissions by more than 20 or 30% at the most. And I would have really liked to see not only, well, we think that societal changes may mean that people will eat less meat, but I would have liked to see something, we will encourage people shifting to more plant-based diets, and that was not in. So I was asking myself, why is this the case? Why doesn't Commission say, well, apart from all the things connected to the well-being of animals, also in terms of methane emissions, it would be a very good idea of coupling the animal density to the space available, because then of course we would have a lot less animals being reared in the EU. But what I think is that consumers will be willing to pay more for meat and dairy products if the animals are kept and reared responsibly and without cruelty, which is not the case today, to be very honest. Thirdly, when it comes to waste and wastewater, I think there are some good incentives in the strategy, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the respective legislation coming up, because there again, a strategy is very nice, but the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So we will need really binding targets and binding emissions directives or whatever Commission will be using for tackling this issue. I've spoken too long, I guess. Thank you very much.
No, it was very, very interesting what you said. That could I just ask about this consumer issue? Why on agriculture, and I think Europeans have been by far better nowadays informed, is not such a pressure? I would say the energy could be the same, because I would like to buy natural gas for heating that has the best environmental credentials. Where is this weakness? It's consumers are badly organized, or they have not put pressure on governments, or on political level it's not such a big awareness. What is the reasons for failing to do this?
Well, I guess it's a lot of lobby pressure, of course. I'm following the discussion on the labeling of food in Germany for quite a few years now, and every time someone came up with an idea, and be it only the Nutri-Score issue, which has been successful in France, the lobby roared and said, well, we cannot do that because it's a much too simple label and it will not cover everything. And also when it comes to animal welfare, we have now in Germany the weird situation that the supermarkets are starting to create their own labels because the Ministry of Agriculture is not delivering, and these labels are not very well done, so to speak. So you get an elevated label for animal welfare if, for example, a pig is kept not on 0.7 square meters, but on 0.9 square meters. If you have ever seen a live pig, and you can imagine how big is 0.7 square meters and how big is 0.9 square meters, this is really ridiculous. I'm very sorry. And consumers are getting misled by, for example, labels on packaged food showing very beautiful little farms with a lot of straw and cows which are living outside, of course, which have horns, of course, and people tend to, well, if you like to eat, you do not want to really know how the animals are kept and reared, because you might have a bad conscience then. And I think that there would be actually a task also for Commission to say we need a harmonized labeling of, for example, meat and dairy products with strict criteria where consumers have a real choice. But up to now, I have had the impression that the agricultural lobby has been very good in exactly working against this, because they say, well, we'll have all those jobs because those farmers won't be able to adhere to the animal welfare label very easily, and so they might have a disadvantage. Where I think, well, I do have some some doubts whether farmers outside the EU would be able to adhere to these labels very easily, because animals aren't kept very well throughout the globe, which is really a pity. And when it comes to encouraging more plant-based diets, someone calculated that if every German would eat only as much meat as the German Society for it's not for food, how do you call it, for eating, let's say, for ecotrophology would probably be the Latin word for that. And they recommend eating about 30 kilos of meat per year, and Germans are eating more than 60 kilos. So if you would adhere to their recommendations, you could, this is a very simple calculation, of course, but then you could double the space for each animal that we rear. And that's, of course, something that the agriculture industry and also the food industry is not a fan of, because, of course, then they would sell less of these products. I'll keep it at that.
Thank you, Jutta. Now I would like to give the floor to Nicolas Gonzalez Casares, member of European Parliament. Nicolas, you have the floor.
Thank you, Andres, and thank you for inviting me to this webinar organized by Florence School of Regulation and Environmental Defense Fund. Thank you, Poppy, and thank you, everyone, because for me it's a pleasure to share this panel with such important experts and colleagues. I think that we are seeing that the path of the European Union to achieve climate neutrality by 2050 is taking shape. I think we have the European Green Deal presented almost 1 year ago. We have the main legislative proposal of the European climate law, which is currently in the last phase of negotiation. As you know, it seeks to achieve climate neutrality target by no later than 2050 and set the goal of reducing greenhouse emissions by 2030. You know that the European Commission and the European Parliament asked to increase the 2030 target to 60%, and the EU Commission wants to increase at least 55%. Whatever the final agreed objectives, all sectors will need to contribute to achieving more ambitious target. I think during these months, several strategies and plans included in the Green Deal path have been presented. They will help to reform the policies and regulations related to the energy transition to a neutral climate neutrality. Regarding the methane strategy, as the strategy highlights, methane is the second most important greenhouse gas, responsible for 20% of the global warming we experience today. Data indicates that reducing energy-related methane emissions is the most cost-effective way to limit methane. I think this is a very important point. And I also think that some of the previous speakers, that EU methane strategy is a good starting point to start tackling the problem, but not the ending point. It's, I think, also a very important issue. First, it proposed to improve the measurement and reporting of methane emissions. Yes, it's one of the main objectives of the strategy. As the saying goes, what is not defined cannot be measured, what is not measured cannot be improved, what is not improved is always degraded. So it will have to reach a better understanding of the problem, but we cannot stay just with this alone. Other measures must also be implemented. The strategy also proposes and promote the production of sustainable biogas to avoid methane emissions from waste. I think this is a win-win solution. It can also generate additional revenue streams for farmers. Let me say one thing here after Jutta. We are right now in controversial vote of the CAP. now, right now, because I just voted 5 minutes ago. We have to change our food habits while progressively changing the common agricultural policy and provide opportunities for development and investment in rural areas. I disagree with Jutta because I live in, not because I live in a region with a lot of cows. In my hometown, we have more cows than people, because at the same time, farmers and cow farmers here, they also have forest and they take care of the forest. So they are farmers producers, they are cows producers, but at the same time, they are taking care of climate. So I think at the same time, we need to change our habits, our food habits, but taking care also about our farmers. They are taking care of the land, and the land is also forest. I think this, we have must keep this in mind. I think in this point, we must use the possibility of the Next Generation EU. This is a good example of 1 month ago, Mariana Mazzucato said, the EU Recovery Fund must serve to push into our economy and institutions what markets are not capable of transforming by themselves. So I think sustainable farmers need this help. Also, the EU Methane Strategy highlights that the EU, as the world's largest importer of fossil fuel, has the responsibility and the strength to promote the reduction of energy-related methane emissions globally. And I think the strategy underlines that external emission of carbon and methane associated with the EU's fossil gas consumption are 3 to 8 times the amount of emissions produced in the Union. This indicates that we need to change this without delay, or the role of natural gas as a bridge in the transition will be more in question. Legislation is necessarily on eliminating routine venting and flaring in the energy sector, covering the full supply chain up to the point of production. I think about flaring, we have to force our gas vendors to serve us methane-free natural gas. I think different tools can be useful, not only tax. I almost have finalized, but I prefer to listen to other speakers. I consumed a lot of time, so Andres, you can go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas. It was really fascinating what you said. Could I ask you something in anticipation? It is always important in European Parliament that they are leaders of the files, but you need also others to get interested. On methane issues in energy sector, how you would judge your colleagues in European Parliament? Will they be interested? Will they be supportive to the Commission initiatives? Or you would say, well, I'm not so certain about it?
I think in this case, we will support. I think that I will ask to my colleagues in my group, the S&D group, and also in the Spanish Socialist delegation to improve a better strategy on methane. And for Spanish people, it will be very easy for Spanish MEPs, because as Stefano Grassi said before, we are asking for an observatory of the observatory. So I think that we will be grateful if the Commission take this decision. So for us, it will be an easier way to do it. I think that I will push forward to improve this strategy, and also the integration of the energy system integration would be important in this case to support the policy to avoid methane emissions.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. Now we slightly change the direction. It's true that politics is important, but sometimes technology is also giving us perhaps sometimes good, easier solutions compared with a heavy political machinery. And I give now the floor to Antoine Rostand about some technological possibilities that he sees in accelerating fight against methane emissions. Antoine.
Okay, thank you. So may I have the screen, please? So the idea here is to share some of the technology that is available today to implement the EU methane strategy. The very good news is we do have in Europe all the technologies to be able to detect, quantify, and attribute the large emitters of methane along the global supply chain. So we do have already the monitoring system that will enable to send a price signal to consumers, to large users of energy, as well as to producing and midstream and pipeline companies, in order to for them to eliminate the super emitters. I cannot share my screen, Maria or Chiara. Okay. Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Okay, and I've put a screen less the previous speaker, because I think a good picture tells more than 1,000 words, as we say. And here you can see all these dots are large methane venting emission that we can see with European technology, with the Copernicus satellite imagery. And we believe that all of this hotspot can be eliminated in a very short period of time, within 2 or 3 years. If you see Saudi Arabia, there are almost no large emission of methane when it's the largest energy producer, while you have a much smaller country like Turkmenistan, Iran, Iraq, or the US emitting a lot of methane through these large emitters. So the situation today is we do have together the political will, as we've heard Mr. Grassi this morning and the MPs. We have the political will, and we do have the technology to enforce a strategy that will enable us to eliminate all these super emitters in 2 or 3 years. This will be the largest ever contribution to climate action, because this will represent the equivalent of 1 gigaton of CO2 removed from anthropogenic emission in 2 or 3 years. So the equivalence of all France and Germany emission together. So what is at stake here is obviously our planet. It's our ability to reach a 1.5 scenario. If we don't handle methane, we know that we'll never achieve 1.5 or the 2-degree scenario. So it is something we need to do now. It is really by handling methane that's the shortest pathway to positive climate action. So the way it works, there are 3 components in the European technology. The first one is Sentinel-5P, the tropomy instrument that enables us to detect and quantify large plume of methane. So this one is a very large plume in Algeria that was detected by Sentinel-5P. Now, the good news is Sentinel-2, which was not designed to detect methane, has some response on the methane gas, and with the proper algorithm, we can attribute very precisely with a 20-meter resolution where the gas is coming from. So that was the largest, let's say, concern with Sentinel-5P, the lack of precision in attribution. And if you combine 5P and Sentinel-2, then we can attribute very precisely where the methane is coming from. So that's a major breakthrough that we've just cracked in the last couple of weeks. And then you need AI and algorithms. So at Kairos, we are a European technology firm, partially funded by the Horizon 2020 from the Commission. And we've built a system to be able to identify, quantify, and attribute to the polluters the large leaks of methane. So this is available now. And you can see here, the large leak of methane coming from a valve station on the pipeline. So we know exactly when it has happened, who has done it. So it's a complete game changer in our ability to fight methane. And this is global. I mean, we have a global coverage. We are making this information available through the IEA methane tracker. So we are providing country-specific information on the number of super emitters. So we believe transparency is very important. We cannot keep that for ourselves. We are sharing that for the public, for the decision makers, for political forces to see where is the baseline, and we'll update these numbers. Unfortunately, we've seen an increase in large leaks between 2020 and 2019, a 30% increase. So that's extremely worrying. These are huge leaks, and they should not be there, and they are increasing. The very good news is that Kadri Simpson has endorsed this technology using Copernicus satellite, tweeting the map that we've developed on the super emitters. And clearly there is in the methane strategy a willingness to eliminate super emitters on the global basis. We believe it is really the priority, because as I said, it is very easy to fix. None of these leaks should happen. I have been on the field, it's not normal to have a leak of that size. It's just, because of negligence that this happened. There is almost none in Europe, and we do have a lot of pipelines. There is almost none in Saudi when they handle a lot of gas. So it's pure, shortcut, lack of maintenance or negligence. So we can eliminate all these leaks in a very short period of time. And it matters because if you look at what we can eliminate today, it's in a CO2 equivalent over 20 years, it's 1 gigaton. It's absolutely huge. It will be the first ever largest contribution to climate action. So really, we do have the people in this room to take action. Our message here is that we have the means to enforce such a strategy. And I'll give you a few examples. This is a leak in Iraq, 447 tons per hour. This is 60 or 70 coal fire power plant at full steam. The plume length is almost 600 kilometers long. It moved from Iraq up to Kuwait and Saudi. This is happening today. This was a couple of months ago. We've identified a leak in Algeria that has been leaking since 2017, continuously. 20 or 30 tons per hour, continuously leaking. Why should we do that? Why should we keep that? Fixing that is a couple of $1,000 US. In the US, you have leaks a bit south of Chicago at 155 tons per hour, which is 20 coal, plant full steam. So this is midstream. You have large leaks over coal mine, over oil and gas upstream installation. So we do produce and transport gas in Europe, and there is not such a number of large leaks. So this is easily fixable. We do have a pipeline, we do have large leaks in the pipeline, bringing gas to Europe. So this, again, we should just send a signal that we cannot accept that. We do have large leaks over our coal mines here in EU, and again, these are fixable. So we do have the technology today, and I think this reflects what Mr. Grassi was saying, that we do have a way today to look at the global supply chain and differentiate between clean gas and, let's say, dirty gas. So here we've looked at the visible methane intensity of different providers of gas into Europe, and you see a big difference between Russian LNG and US LNG. So We have ways to differentiate between dirty gas and clean gas. It exists today. We can also differentiate between responsible producer and not responsible producers. At least in visible methane, we don't see everything, but at least what we can see, we can measure, and we can already ask these producers to eliminate this, and transporter to eliminate these large leaks. And the way to do that is clearly we should not wait 2024, we should not wait 2023 or 2022 or 2021. We need to do it now. We need to send a price signal. Jutta, Stefano, we need to send a price signal that these super emitters will be penalized one way or the other. So this will have an impact. This will have an impact very short term. And my goal, and I think it's the goal of everybody in this room, that in 3 years, this map is black. We move from this ugly map with all these super emitters to the black one. And we can do it. We have the will, we have the technology, as a buyer power, Europe can do that, and I'm sure we'll be able to do that. Thanks.
Thank you, Antoine. It's a really clear presentation. And the only thing I wanted to, perhaps you could be more precise, what you call dirty gas and what you call clean gas, because you use, I understand the context, but still, what it would be in your approach, dirty and what is a clean, what you would call. And there's a company as well, the one that actually is dirty and this one is clean. It's generic, you could easily say it, but when it goes to detail, it could be problematic. Please.
I think this was what Nicolas was saying. We can see flaring and we can see the big emitters today. So we just need to differentiate between the amount of methane that is flared, because this is completely useless to flare methane, and the venting that we can see by space. So if you took a supply chain, whether there is super emitters on the supply chain, we can follow the full supply chain, and it's going to be clean from super emitters. I'm not saying there is no smaller leaks, but at least we can guarantee that there is no large leaks happening in this specific supply chain. So it's just looking from the sky and saying, okay, we have seen no super emitters. We have not seen these large leaks of methane. So clearly there is, the procedures are well, and there is, we can qualify this gas as clean gas. I don't think we should ban or something like that. You need to incentivize producers, consumers, to say, guys, why don't you buy clean gas if you can, we can differentiate between producers who do not apply the right operating procedure and the ones that are doing the job the right way.
Thank you. So the presentation of Antoine will bring very timely Mark Radka. So Mark, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very pleased to be with you today. I'd like to start with a general thought about energy systems integration related to methane emissions. So I work for an environmental organization, and one lesson that we have learned sometimes the hard way is to try very hard to avoid causing new problems with our clever solutions for old problems. This is maybe a variation of Stefano's blind spots. So it's prudent to be cautious about what the background document called deep systems integration. If this means locking in gas infrastructure when we really need to be thinking about an energy transition based on achieving net zero or even negative GHG emissions. There is a role for gas, but I don't think anybody on the panel or in the room today, can reliably predict exactly how long that transition will occur and at what pace. We know it needs to go quickly. And if the past year has taught us anything, it's that the future can be pretty unpredictable, and that there is a real value in systems that have some kind of resilience and redundancy. So maintaining a degree of flexibility is key in the energy transition, and I would refer to the deep but flexible systems integration, or deep but adaptable systems integration, that which pulls in agricultural methane or hydrogen, but with an eye that we might not be as able to predict the future as we think. You've heard already about the climate benefits of reducing methane emissions. They're very large. According to our UNEP emissions gap report, NDC ambition under the Paris Agreement needs to be increased by 3 to 5 times to limit warming to 2 degrees, even more so if the goal is well below 2 or 1.5 degrees. This is, of course, the global total ambition, the sum of what every country has stated in its contributions when you do the math and add them up. Now, the IEA says that it is today technically feasible to cut 3/4 of methane emissions from global oil and gas production. So focus on oil and gas. That would be at the high end about 15% of the current greenhouse gas emissions gap. In the world of emissions reductions, this is a very significant amount, non-trivial to say the least. But the reality is that today, very few nationally determined contributions submitted to the Climate Secretariat in Bonn make any reference to methane. That means we all of us in the audience or in front of us on the screen have a role in spreading the word that reducing methane emissions is both cost effective and a very solid climate win. Now, from a climate change perspective, methane is methane. The molecules are indistinguishable in the atmosphere. The physics is what it is. So an emission of biomethane is bad, even if the methane comes from renewable sources. And what this means is that the entire system or systems have to be very tight with solid monitoring and reporting requirements placed on operators. Getting good information to consumers and investors on the methane intensity of gas they purchase really needs to be a priority. And I think we heard that the technology is advancing that will enable this to be the case. It is, to be somewhat contrary with Antoine's presentation, I think it's currently challenging to provide the accurate information on methane intensity, at least at the level or the granularity that most of our interlocutors have said is necessary. I think we're moving in that direction, but today most estimates are based on standard emission factors that underestimate emissions. They do not capture the super emitters. We just saw some good evidence of that. But the good news is, and you just heard this, that there have been rapid advances in technologies, and we're very close to the time when I think it will be we will collectively be more able to provide the sort of accurate, detailed information in a transparent manner that different audiences will require. We have been working with the Commission, with EDF and many leading oil and gas companies to improve measurement and transparency frameworks, is probably the best word, through what Stefano mentioned, the Oil and Gas Methane Partnership. And we're about to release an improved version of this protocol in a sense. There are now about 60 companies, many of them in Europe, that have agreed to directly measure and report on emissions from a significant portion of their assets globally, both operated and non-operated assets. And we are creating this international methane emissions observatory with the strong support and advocacy of the European Commission. The intention is multiple objectives here, but one of them is to integrate the sort of data that flows from different sources, ground-based measurements often provided by companies, aerial surveys, drones, and the satellite data of the sort just presented by Antoine. The goal is to generate and make publicly available the most accurate, up-to-date, and credible emissions information, again, packaged in ways that speaks to different observers and different customers. We are finding that interest in this is growing. I take my hat off to the European Commission, because I think without the push and the anticipation of what would come out in the communication, the methane communication, the interest would be there, but it wouldn't be accelerating at the pace that we've seen. The technology in Europe and the leadership shown by Europe has filled an important gap internationally. one could say, I think that under the Obama administration, the US was quite progressive in this area. EDF and the US Environmental Protection Agency were doing a lot on methane emissions and development of technology. The EU has definitely stepped into that gap. And as a large importer of methane, absolutely from a UN perspective, has a significant role to play in reducing emissions. Just one example of, I think, the way that the tide is shifting. We read in the US publication Politico on Wednesday of this week, so only 2 days ago, had an article that the French government had used its stake in Engie to delay signing of a $7 billion LNG import deal with the US company next decade. And the reason given was concerns that the exporter's shale gas was, quote, too dirty. So I think this is a harbinger of things to come, and we look forward to working with many of you on all efforts to both publicize the importance of methane and to take action through better monitoring and reconciliation of data and making that available to decision makers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. It was really perfect and a very pointed presentation. Could I ask you a bit of, well, I don't know how much you could say, but what would you would say, as it is a global issue, clearly, how far global cooperation could go in ideal case? Let's imagine everybody is in favor, and what could we expect in the best case scenario? How far it could go?
I think it could go quite far. I mean, there will always be holdouts, as there are in any area, either for lack of technology or mistrust of the way that the pendulum is swinging. But in our favor as a group is that many of the measures are cost effective. I mean, Antoine gave a few numbers there. So I think better information about the potential of technology and improved operating practices, it's simple things sometimes that could actually go quite far. We're finding increasing interest on the part of national oil companies in developing or emerging economies to talk intelligently about this issue. And we're trying to bring about a reconciliation between the climate aspirations, which often come from the Ministry of Environment, and the very real, let's say, investments or changes in practice that have to come from an energy ministry, or particularly when there's a national oil company that's important to the national economy. So Andres, I'm optimistic. I couldn't tell you we can get 80% or 85%, but in the last 2-3 years, we've seen decided momentum in this direction. So watch this space. I think we all have a role to play in pushing and advocating, but with high hopes for success.
Thank you. That really was encouraging. Now we will move to Francisco de la Flor. He's an early mover with his company on curbing methane emissions, but I think we should appreciate his enormous effort really to get the European midstream and downstream gas industry emerging in the subject. Francisco, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Peebles, for your kind words, and you and Poppy for giving us the opportunity to share what we are doing to contribute to disseminate among segments and all the community. Please, Chiara, could you display some nice colors, green colors, to illustrate what I would like to disseminate here in the first. I stay here for a moment. After listening to Antoine, I really feel, or we may feel, very, very, very small. That our contribution may be very small. I mean, what is in our hands, but this is what we have, and we want to contribute anyhow. Let me start with the conclusions, and I will illustrate them with the coming slides. The conclusions here in this slide. The industry here, I represent the midstreamers, has demonstrated. I think you are aware. All of you are aware that demonstrated this awareness, the commitment, and the implementation practices. Our main focus is on measurement, reporting, verification, LDAR campaigns, and the top-down, bottom-up reconciliation. So very concrete activities, and share all of that share in a very, I would say, transparent way, a very open and transparent way. Then Antoine referred to the supermeters. Then what we can contribute again is quite small, but we will not stop doing the homework. Some other topics in the methane strategy I will refer later on are completely outside of our capacities, which is something like methane supply index and something else, so that I will not refer to that. Final comment on this is the title is the context of energy system integration. We know that the natural gas will remain in the energy matrix for many years to come, until replaced by other gases based on its affordability and technological development, so that the contribution for methane emission reduction needs to be accelerated. Next, please, Chiara. And now the evidences of what we do. Starting with the setting the picture, gathering in a report. We were asked by the Madrid Forum to do that, and we gathered the state of the art with the participation of all parts of the value chain. So they were, let's say, happy to be here to contribute. But just from exploration and production to utilization, including biogas, players were also working here. The document peer reviewed by, I would say, first-class specialists, so that I presume that the quality is, I would say, up to date, is the state of the art. As we already highlighted, the emission is not new. The tackle with the emission is not new for the industry, has been addressed for decades. Although the main focus was just to guarantee the safety of people and facilities. Now, the environmental angle is also is probably the main focus of our work. Report is available in several websites, so you can't download. Next, please. More activities and action from the industry. The action plan we have developed, again gathering everybody from the different associations to contribute and to identifying 50 complementary actions. Also available very concrete actions that we are trying to develop. Second, just the dissemination activities among other geographical areas. This is probably one of our powerful tools. We are convinced, and we try to disseminate for some others to do the same, to follow us. I just leverage our capacity and our position. Third, and linking with what was said before, we try to enhance the collaboration with non-EU companies, because we do know that the vast majority of the emissions is produced beyond our borders. Final, in this slide, the assessment of methane emissions for gas transmission distribution system operators, developing the technical guidance in accordance with the harmonized and transparent methodology. Again, transparency. Next, please. More concrete activities. And now I refer to Mark also, just on the common methane emissions reporting framework, collaborating with the Commission, UNEP, and EDF, with the aim of having this common methane reporting framework and developing a reporting template and technical guide. By the way, this picture is the last physical meeting we had at the early of this year, before the pandemic break, let's say, and was devoted to methane emissions. On the right-hand side, the template looks like this, a really complete template to gather very detailed information. Next, please. What else? Developing best practices. Again, this is what we, the industrial players or the midstreamer, can do, developing the best practices to reduce methane emissions. On identification, detection, measurement, and quantification. For all the 4 segments, I would say transmission, LNG, underground gas storages, and distribution. Developing guidelines for target setting. Target setting is essential just to share our knowledge and our practices and our experiences with those that are coming behind us, for them to learn and go quickly with what we have done. Probably we have used, when we have used more years, those arriving now can do it very quickly. Transparency documents on our website. Thanks for the possibility to disseminate and to let the audience, this very wide and complete audience, to just encourage to download and listen, and read and implement. Next, please. Comparison of technologies and reconciliation of data. Is another important activity we are trying to develop with the specialist, our specialists in the research area, under the umbrella of our research association, just a GEAC, group of experts on the research dossier. And last in this slide, I would like to report the collaboration of all of our association, this association, GERC, GI, and Mercogas, to support the Cameo project and the European Space Agency. Then very concrete activities. Just the last page, next please, Chiara. Just showing the close collaboration among our industry association. Yes, we were able to publish just some minutes after the EU communicated its strategy to reduce methane emissions, our supported reaction, because this is the outcome of a wide and long collaboration among these players, and together with, I presume, I hope that you appreciate and you are in the same page with the institutions. So last one, final page, next, Chiara. Apart from thanking you for listening, I will take the advantage to send a message to Nicolas. I'm very happy to hear how my member of the European Parliament have their feet on earth. Thank you very much. Thanks, Nicolas.
Thank you, Francisco. It's definitely a considerable achievement to get the common position just after the strategy is being published by the industry, because it's never easy to get everybody under the same wording for different reasons. How you would say the industry could react to Commission's binding proposal to MRV framework? Not going into details, but basically, is there a big opposition, or you would say that industry is ready for or is expecting it?
Well, we during this let's say couple of years, when we intensify the interactions with the authorities, I believe they saw how we were working on these activities, and that we can do on voluntary basis. We are doing that on voluntary basis, and if they want to let's say to implement and to go for legislation, I mean, we are, most of the vast majority of us are regulated entities, so we will follow what this is in the regulation. But I think that would be good signal for the industry, for our in segments, that we will continue developing this voluntary with a strong commitment and a strong engagement. That will be good signal for our segment.
Thank you very much. So we have limited time, so that's why my next two questions will address to political block, and starting with Jutta, and it's to Nicholas, and at the end of Stefano. There are two questions that comes out, and it's very clear political. One is coming indirectly from Eurogas. They say, we would like to have binding target to reduce greenhouse gas intensity of gas at least by 20% by 2030. Well, it's courageous from the industry. How politics should respond to such a type of target? And second, it's similar also coming from part of industry for procurement target based on gas intensity from outside. So how you would see such a type of approaches? So it's rather, well, complicated questions, but you don't have 2 minutes each of you on these very, very difficult questions. Jutta.
Yes, thank you very much. I think that's exactly the sort of pathway we need, that we're setting clear targets for individual years or for individual, let's say, greenhouse gas intensity or whatever, because that if you have a target, then you can actually make a plan, and you can actually look at what investment do I need for reaching this target. And you can go to your bank and say, okay, look, this legislation is coming up and I will have to reach this target at that and that year, else I cannot sell my product anymore. And everyone will be affected, of course. So we must not limit it to European gas suppliers, but of course we have to make suppliers from outside the EU equally liable to fulfill these targets. And of course they will have to provide valid data on whether they have really done so. But in principle, I'm perfectly fine with this approach of what is actually feasible, and we must have a very ambitious target, because if we set a target that will be achieved with business as usual, then we are not fulfilling our task as policymakers, I believe, because it's our task to set targets that actually make EU fulfill the Paris Agreement. We have signed a Paris Agreement, a Paris Accord, which is legally binding on a völkerrechtlich, I'm missing the English word, but legally binding on international law's base. We have to do everything in order to stay below 2 degrees and pursue steps to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. And therefore it's inevitable to set the most ambitious targets possible, which is, of course, it must be technically feasible, but we must not shy away from being bold in ambition. Thanks.
Thank you. Nicholas.
About the target and this question, I think the energy sector integration strategy goes in this direction. Quotas or percentage targets could be a good tool to decarbonize the gas sector and promote green gas, such as hydrogen, for example. I hope a good impact assessment from the Commission in the modification proposal of the Renewable Directive. But I think that we have to avoid to create artificial markets that could have problems in the medium long term. Also, avoid to block the best cost-effective technologies or measures to reduce these emissions. Thank you.
Thank you. Stefano. I think Stefano perhaps has, Stefano is in.
Well, I think there are arguments in favor and against fossil fuel specific targets because it can be a very straightforward tool, but as Mr. Gonzalez reminded, it can also have a limitation in terms of artificial creation of the market, and it conflicts a bit with the idea of technological neutrality and helping every actor to choose the most cost-effective path to decarbonize. So normally the Commission until now has always privileged the idea of sector-specific targets, not fossil fuel-specific targets. You can have a target for renewable in heating and cooling. You can have a target for different type of the transport sector and the fuels to be used, etc. So we've never gone down the path of a fuel specific target. On the other idea of procurement targets for imports in the EU, just give me the opportunity to remind that we so far we have presented I would say a range or a toolkit of tools that we could use to address the issue of products coming into the European market. And one way is to encourage the global voluntary action, and through energy dialogues, we have seen some of the countries on the map are countries with which we have quite intense energy dialogues, to use that avenue. Second avenue, and the colleague from the MARC from UNEP reminded it, the observatory could be a good way to improve transparency and knowledge about emissions across the supply chain, because what we will like the observatory to build over time and possibly rapidly is a methane supply index, which is measuring the intensity of methane emissions across the different supply routes. And that is also something that the market and the industry could use as a benchmark to decide from where they want to buy. One example was mentioned in France. You can decide where to buy depending on your preferences, the cost, the emissions, and the compliance with your policy preferences, for instance. Third, we want to look at possible alternatives, whether targets, standards, or other forms of incentives, where I think we will basically say, if you don't meet those standards, then you cannot sell or be consumed on the European market. And that, I think, is a graduation of interventions that goes from the lightest to the most impactful, and also the most the hardest in terms of regulatory impact. And we are working, we will be working on them to try to find the most effective mix and the most effective tool as a follow-up to the strategy.
Thank you, Stefano. Poppy, now I would like that you come with some concluding remarks before I close the webinar. Poppy.
Thank you very much, everyone, for your remarks. We had a very lively conversation, both online, but also on the chat and the Q&A section. And I think it's fair to say that what is important to note is that we all agree on what needs to be done. And we all try ways on how to get to reducing methane emissions from oil and gas. We learned and we're all updated about what's technologically feasible today. But I think the most important takeaway for me is what will be feasible and viable in 2 or 3 years' time, which is when any legislation is likely to be enacted. The most heartening thing, as you said yourself, Andris, earlier today, is that the Parliament, which is typically the body that you really cannot do without if you want to secure a good policy, is what we heard from both Jutta and Nicholas today. They are more or less aligned. It is extremely important to have people like Stefano Grassi and his colleagues in the Commission who have a more modern way of developing policy, which is more open innovation than the old style kind of command and control type of policy making. And this is extremely important for policies like that, which promote innovation and collaboration. And I think the Commission's approach is definitely encouraging that, and that's super important. We heard from Antoine today about, that's an Horizon 2020 project. So we know that, the R&D program of the EU is delivering also that kind of proper kind of breakthrough innovations, and they're going to keep working to validate the product, to go out to the market and support users who are soon going to have to make some decisions. Mark, I think I really loved the framing that you brought in terms of system integration. And I think this is the right way to think, as far as it's a very creative way to think, that of course no one can predict how fast the transition is going to happen, but you brought us the concept of, a more adaptive, more flexible system integration. And I think this is exactly the appropriate mindset to go into systems like the European energy system. And last, Francisco took us through the literally very many initiatives, both him in his role as the Enagas lead, but also in his role as the GIE, the European midstream sector, are working to address the issue voluntarily. And of course, what we're all here today to discuss is scale. How can we scale these efforts, and how can we make sure that they deliver? And I think it is hard for anyone to disagree with the need for regulation and clarity. I would like to close my remarks with, I really wish we had half an hour more because we really have some of Europe's really most important thinkers. I saw Jonathan Stern earlier, who has really thought long and hard about the geopolitical aspects. He was with us, but he obviously had to jump. I was hoping to invite Franziska Holz from DIW Berlin, who really kind of has an overview of the economic and the markets system in Europe, and she definitely has a lot of perspectives to bring in the conversation. And I mean, literally hundreds of thinkers who I know are sitting in pieces of the puzzle. So my invitation and my encouragement to all of you is to just keep discussing together and keep being creative from a place of expertise, because we do have that in Europe. And as Mark said before, we cannot really solve new problems with old solutions and structures. So I leave this webinar today with a huge sense of optimism and motivation, an appetite to keep talking with all of you so that we fix this soon and fast.
So that leaves me after Poppy's very nice conclusion, just to thank our speakers, Stefano Grassi, Jutta Paulus, Nicolas Gonzalez Casares, Mark Radka, Francisco de la Flor, Antoine Roston.